So on the left here, we can see I've created that roles directory. So if we go back to documentation, do you remember we had that directory there, roles, and then this is your role here. This folder represents the role, and the name of the folder is the name of the role that you have to reference it by that name. Okay, let's have a look. So we've got roles, and then I've created a role called users. So this role is going to manage our users. The name implies what it's going to do. So a good name will give you an idea of the action or the resource that that role will manage. In this case, it's our users. And we've got two directories. We've got defaults and we've got tasks. So defaults is where we're going to store our variables. If we come back to the documentation, we can see that we've got vars and then we've got defaults. So they're both for storing variables, but they have a different precedence order. So they get called in, and if there's two conflicting variables in each one, then one has precedence over the other. Don't worry about that for now. We'll come back to that later. For now, we're just going to use the defaults folder, and we also have our required tasks folder, and we have in defaults we have main.yaml, and in tasks we have main.yaml. Okay, so inside of defaults we've got our main.yaml, and inside of here I have a variable called users, and that variable consists of a list. See these dashes here? That's our list, and the list contains this object with two keys in it, username and state, and we have three of those to represent our three users that we're going to create and manage on the system. We've got me, Michael C, we've got John Doe, and we're actually going to delete John Doe. He's on the system right now, but we're going to delete him. And we're also going to create a Superman user as well, because we like Superman and we want him to be on our server. So that's where we're storing our variable. Then under tasks, we also have a main.yaml, and we have something that should be quite familiar, except for the use of the variable here, and except for the loop line. This should actually be familiar, right? That's exactly the same thing as in our master.yaml. Okay, there it is. Okay, I'm changing the name from create a non-root user to just manage our user accounts, because this task is actually going to loop over lots of users, and those users may or may not be root users. Okay, so I'm keeping it nice and simple, and I'm just saying this is going to manage our users, and then I'm going to use the user module. So what am I doing here? So I'm going to loop over that list of users that I showed you earlier in the defaults, and then I'm going to set the name of the user to whatever the username field was in the item inside the list. Remember we had that username field, and I'm going to set the state, which can be present or absent for the user module, to whatever the state is set in the actual list. So let's go back to the list. So the username would be Michael C, and they'd be present, so we'd add them to the system. The username would be John Doe. Then it would loop around, and then it would look at John Doe and say, John Doe, you are to be removed from the system, so I'm going to make sure that you're not present. I'm going to make sure you're absent from the system. And then it's going to loop around again, and it's going to look at the Superman user and determine that that user should be present, and then the loop will finish. So it will run 3 times, because we have 3 items in our list. We'll add a 4th one. So now what we need to do, okay, so that's the basic loop and the basic structure of our role inside of our roles directory. We now need to invoke the role. Okay, so we're going to come back to our playbook, and again we have this task here for managing our one user, but it's not ideal. It's not efficient. It's not the best way of doing it, right? So we're going to comment that out. Okay, so that's a comment within a YAML file, so Ansible will ignore anything with a comment in front of it like this. That will be ignored because it's a comment. And what we're actually going to do, and I like to put it above tasks, but I don't believe there's a requirement for it to be above tasks. It can just be anywhere within this structure. I'm going to put the roles keyword, and this can be more complicated than a simple list of strings that represent role names, but for now we're just going to keep it simple, and I'm just going to use our users role. Okay, so I'm saying I want you to bring in the role users, execute it, and then move on to tasks. Okay, roles always come before tasks. So now what happens if we execute that? Okay, so again, we're going to do Ansible-playbook master.yaml. We're going to use our inventory for our DigitalOcean servers, and then we're going to use the root user to log into that account. So let's execute this playbook. Hopefully I've got everything right. So it's going to connect to our web servers. It's going to gather some facts. It's going to get information about, that's getting information about the server. And now it's going to manage our users for us. So let's see what it does. So my user already exists. It's got rid of John Doe. And I know that the Superman user already exists because I created them earlier. So now we know that Michael C exists, John Doe does not, and Superman exists, which is great. Okay, it's also confirmed that Nginx is exactly as it should be. So what happens if we run that again? Because we had a change there because we deleted John Doe. So if we run it again, the role will execute again, and what we will see is that the Superman user will just be okay now, right? Because we've deleted it. So that's our role in action being executed against each system 97.73, 97.71, the two IP addresses there. And as you can see, John Doe state is indeed absent, is not present. So what happens if we add an additional user? In fact, let's do something. Let's actually get rid of John Doe now because we know we've deleted him from our servers, right? So let's actually change John Doe to be crispy bacon. Okay, and then we're just going to go present. Okay, if I run that now, will it create the crispy bacon user? Yep. It'll log into both web servers. It'll see that list represents a particular state that is not present, so it will make it present. And then it will move on to the Superman user, which already exists. There you go. There's our crispy bacon user. And then there's our Superman user. And of course, our Nginx systems already exist. So that is the basic fundamentals of creating an Ansible role and using one within your playbooks.